Hello, we're finally on the internet. Welcome back to Wild Speculations. I am Daniel. Scott is not well today, so he will not be joining me. It will just be us for as long as my system will hold. We'll see. I hope you all are having a good evening. Probably better than mine since, your machine probably didn't crash 6 minutes before it was supposed to go live. But I thought I'd do a little something fun today. And let's get rid of the slideshow of the cast from Alexander Unlimited. And Scott mentioned his potential build that he wanted to see Laura play. And I went back and forth on what to do for this show today. And finally settled on, well, I could just go, in depth into some builds that I think would be interesting to see how the cast would play them. And then maybe spin into a Q&A. And if the Q&A starts sooner, all the better, I guess. Or as we go through it, no doubt, ideas will occur to you. And I started with Liam on my list because, well, let's talk about the brief that I gave myself for this. First, the player has not played the class before. I tried to make it so that they also have not played the race before. Although, it's not exactly accurate, because we know Talison has played this race that I chose for him, pre-stream, before Orion joined the group. I wanted it to be challenging in some way, whether that be sort of get that cast member out of their comfort zone in some way, whether it be with the rules or a potential outlook that might challenge them. Rose, yes. In fact, I have an elf, a human, and a half-elf in my list. So, yes, you're not wrong. And the thing is like, there's 7 of them. So the other part of it was, I wanted to avoid doubling up on classes. That tends to be their goal thus far. They will let someone else, like Laura has given up Rogue and Warlock twice. She's given up her primary picks twice, so that other people could play them. So that was also part of this brief. They couldn't be the same class. And with 7 people and 12 classes, I think, 13 with Artificer, it becomes not impossible or difficult, but when you start taking out classes that they've played already, then it becomes a little more tricky. But Liam was the one who really inspired this idea that I had. And I was like, so how do I choose what I want him to sort of explore, which is faith, and that kind of thing. He kind of dabbled in it with Vax, but not too deeply, I don't think. His faith in the Raven Queen was almost more transactional, in a sense. Through Pike's example, he started finding a faith. But I think I would just like to see Liam tackle, from the beginning, a character who is very strong in their faith. And I also wanted him to have a potential alienness in his outlook, just because I think that would be something that Liam would enjoy. And so for Liam, I chose Elf, Life Cleric, with the Entertainer background. And I'm leaning toward Eladrin or High Elf as the specific subrace. And I did this because the faith angle and the elf gives him an opportunity to play around with some of the ideas that he has played with in the past with Vax and with Caleb, with mortality. And an elf, if you really get into character, and I think Liam would, has a different relationship with mortality, with growing old. And life clerics tend to be more vivacious, more about joy. And I think that would be an interesting journey for Liam to take. And the Entertainer background, because it's something I think he could relate to. And also, leaning into that idea of someone who's more the life of the party. Entertainers tend to be that, whether they are genuinely joyous or the tragic clown, however you slice their relationship to entertaining, they tend to end up being the life of the party. And yeah. Actually, I don't think it's an interesting point, Snoopy Ace, about them going evil, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think very specifically the kind of campaign that Matt likes to run is heroics, is good. Even with the shady backgrounds of all of the Mighty Nine and some of their early morally gray choices, they still ended up falling into the role of hero. And I think that's it's not required, but it definitely helps root for a happy ending for your characters, for your cast. It's a little harder to root for the happy ending for the mass murderer, the rapist, the thief who steals indiscriminately. So, no, I don't think we'll see an evil campaign out of Critical Role. The closest thing you're going to get is the Doom one-shot where they were playing the demons. And even then, they leaned more heavily into the comic aspects of being evil than, like, really being evil. I don't think there's a comfort to do that, especially with their platform. Because inevitably, someone is going to say they're doing it on the show, therefore they are endorsing this behavior, and I don't think you're going to get that. Which is why Percy's gunsmither, or Talison's gunslinger, Percy, ultimately he portrayed him and played him as a tragic figure. That he regretted inventing the gun. Yeah. Exactly, Rose, yeah. The next one on my list, and since I started with Liam, I thought my brain went immediately to Sam. And for Sam, I went back and forth on Sam because he both likes to play the cliche and also against type. And so I tried to think of something. I struggled to think of a cliche that he could play with that wouldn't automatically become a caricature of another PC or anything like that. So I went with Human Barbarian. That's easy in terms of abilities. There's not a bunch of spells to know or memorize. There's not, do I get sneak attack this turn? Do I not? There's Barbarian, go in, hit stuff, and be hit. But the challenge that I wanted to throw him, the curveball, is the hermit background. Sam is very vivacious. He is very much likes to be the center of attention. And even his low charisma goblin ended up being the center of things quite often. So I think giving him the hermit background might force him into a more background role. But the barbarian aspect puts him out front and makes him important in combat. And I'd like to see that, because I mean, you could argue Veth Not was more important than Scanlan in combat, just as a damage dealer. But it's been a while since we had sort of a dedicated tank at the table full time. Marisha was sort of... Bo was kind of a tank. She filled that role because she had the highest AC. But I don't know. Bo never felt like a tank. And monks can be good tanks, but they're too mobile, if that makes sense. Their strength really does lie in moving around. And if your tank is moving around, the bad guys can move too. And Ashley wasn't there all the time. But I think I'd like to see Sam play a human barbarian. And I think it would work pretty well. And I would be interested to see how he sort of weaves it together. A hermit barbarian. Because, like, hermits, the background can really be not necessarily the linchpin, but the inciting incident of a campaign because of the discovery feature. And Matt making Scanlan the bard the linchpin of campaign 1, I think proves that Sam could handle it. And I also like the idea that the hermit barbarian probably is going to dump intelligence. He might not, but likely. And Sam not taking very good notes. I like the idea that the person who sort of kicked everything off with this great discovery, what they had, this insight, can't remember it. And I think there's a lot of potential comedy gold there. At the expense of Sam, who is perpetually making everyone else the butt of his jokes. And it would be nice to have it turn around on him a little bit. Next on my list is Talison. And we know Talison yeah, Rose. I think, yeah, exactly. The ignorant of etiquette is probably the angle that I would expect him to take, yes. But Talison, we know he's played a Dragonborn, and I think, if memory serves, it was a Paladin even, pre-stream before Orion joined. And that's actually what I've chosen for him now, a Dragonborn Paladin, with the sailor background. And I did this mostly because Talison has the reputation of, the dark, 1,000-year-old, creepy guy. And the upright, knight in shining armor, or in this case, scales, because I chose silver Dragonborn, would be a nice change of pace, I think, for him. And I chose the sailor background because he was most uncomfortable on the sea. I almost went noble, but I was like, no, Percy was a noble, and I didn't want to do that again. And then I was like, ooh, sailor, because he was uncomfortable with the water terms. And so that's my out of his comfort zone. choice on the build is being a sailor. And yeah, I think I'm also interested to see what kind of alien nature Talison would bring to a Dragonborn. Because none of the non-humans have been particularly alien. They've been sort of human adjacent, and no one has had to really work to get into that alien mindset. And so that's why some of these choices that I've made has been to deliberately skew their perceptions potentially, and really sort of do what Ashley did with Fern in Exandria Unlimited. Just completely get out of their regular human headspace and look at things completely different. And I think Matt coached her, and we didn't really discuss this in the wrap-up, but Matt sort of coming to her defense or explaining it to people, like why Fern was the way that she was, some of Ashley's choices, I think he helped coach her in that aspect. Because, I mean, why wouldn't you ask Matt? He's played Archphase for them forever. So, yeah. Next was Travis. And for Travis, to get him out of his headspace and so Travis is sort of a double barrel out of your comfort zone for my choices. The race, no. Specifically Forest. Because I want to see Travis play another small creature. When they were all elves, it was great. And we got a glimpse, I think, potentially of what he could do. But the idea of Travis being a forest gnome, a small creature that can talk to forest animals, just think of all the times in Campaign 2 when Caduceus was talking to animals and plants and Travis's reaction. I want Travis to be on the Caduceus side of that. And see what he does with it. The class that I have chosen for Travis that I want to see him play is a challenge to his comfort zone. And that is Wizard. And specifically War Wizard. And this is to better highlight his tactical savvy. That he sort of got to play around with Ford, but unfortunately Ford had the flaw, quote unquote flaw, of not wanting to be the leader. Being very, very interested in staying in the background. To be involved in the leadership decisions, but to not be the one up front and making choices. And I think a War Wizard is right there. He gets to stay back as a wizard because you don't want to be up front, but still have the tactical insights. And that's also why I gave him the soldier background. And again, this is to sort of throw him a bone of something that he can definitely sink his teeth into, because he is close to a lot of military folks, and is close to that world. So that's sort of the ground. Because I'm throwing him such a curveball with the race and class, I was like, I should give him something to hold on to. So, yeah, and just the idea of a forest gnome soldier who goes into wizardry. There's a lot of layers there that I'd love to see Travis sort of wrap his head around and come out with something interesting. And of course, the wizard is the most complex class, and with Ford, he dipped his toe into magic, and he played the sorcerer in Laura's Harry Potter one-shot. So, like, I think he's got the ability to do it. And yeah, Rose, I think he would have fun with it. Even though it may be such that we might never see him talk to an animal in the show, it would just be, I mean, that for me would be a layer of hilarity on top of itself. To stubbornly refuse to speak to these animals, yeah, it would just be hilarious. Which brings us to Laura. And I do like Scott's idea of her being a bard. And I was struggling with the race choice. Because I was like, again, trying to think of the alien angle, how to break them out. And she's a tiefling. She was a half-elf. And I've already given Talison Dragonborn, and I gave Liam Elf. So I was like, what can and Travis Gnome, another long-lived, weird potential headspace to get into. And then I was like, well, dwarf might be fun for Laura to do. Turtle I didn't think about, or Genasi. Interesting possibility. But the dwarf I settled on because it will help her re-embrace being the treasurer of the group, and allow her to barter with Matt again, which everyone so enjoyed from campaign 1. And I gave her the artisan background, again, to be even more permissive of that bargaining and being the treasurer. And also to give her sort of an homage to Percy in a weird way, because she got such joy out of Percy giving gifts. And I think the same thing in campaign 2 with Gesture, but a different way that she did that. And I think having her be the artisan this time, to be the one to make the gifts. Or she could take the variant and do the merchant, and really lean into it. Because that's like playing in Marquette, for me, that's sort of where yes, Rose. Now, that wasn't my primary thing, but I did chuckle at them being both short. On the short side would be funny. But also, for Laura, out of her comfort zone, to be the stocky, bearded dwarf. I thought would be good too. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I thought about. I mean, mostly like the dwarf artisan or merchant, just really tickled my ideas about what she could play up in a Marquette setting. The barker for the stall, basically. Yeah, and the tragedy in her backstory might be how she lost it all. But yeah, on to Ashley. Ashley was another one that I had some difficulty on the race. Because she was an ASMR in Campaign 2, a gnome in Campaign 1. So she's already done sort of some of the weird options that you can do. And I settled on half-elf. And I think the reason I did is to give her some piece of the team half-elf that she seemed to miss out on in Campaign 1. Although, you'll note, spoiler warning, there's no other half-elf in the group, but it was just to sort of give her that. And not Ranger Snoopy, for me anyway, although I did think about that. In fact, my first thought was a Beastmaster Ranger. But I discounted it, the same with Druid, because of Exandria Unlimited. And I really don't see anyone playing a Ranger again. I don't. But my pick for her was a wild magic sorcerer. Specifically for all the different ways that she sort of, I don't know, sort of Babe Ruth called some dice rolls in Campaign 2. And yes, Rose, exactly. They had so much fun with the wild magic in Islecross. And I think there were times where Ashley felt a little jealous of some of the fun that the spellcasters were having with that. And I think she would have a lot of fun with it. And Ashley is also sort of on the line of a dice goblin like Laura. She's sort of, her and Marisha are sort of the middle ground between Laura and Liam and Travis. And Sam has sort of been slowly migrating in the direction of the dice goblins. But yeah, I think being a wild magic sorcerer will test her resolve on which side of that line to fall on, and that will be a fun journey to go on. And I gave her the noble background. Because Ashley hasn't been in a leadership position yet. With Pike, she was in a supporting role, as you know, the cleric is wont to do. But she never really made like impactful decisions for the whole group. Not in the way that like Percy did, or Vexalia even. So I'd like to see her with the noble background, and maybe her tragedy is connected with her magic manifesting. And I'd like to see her, yeah, Rose, take that front seat role and steer everybody. And I like the idea that, like, if the wild magic sorcerer lost their noble birthright because their magic manifested, she could play with the idea, the tension of, you know, I was trained, born to lead, and depending on her spell choice, her magic could even lean into that, like with charm spells, friendship, things of that nature, prestidigitation, always be immaculate, that kind of thing. Never have to taste anything that's gross. There's a lot of magic pampering spells that you can take to lean into that. And the idea that that vanity spellcasting manifests and procs the wild magic, and that's what got, you know, that kind of thing, I think is interesting, fertile ground to play with. That I think Ashley could do well with. Which brings us finally to Marisha. And I made her the halfling. And I almost made her rogue. But then I was like, you know, it would be more interesting if the group didn't have a rogue. So let's not do that. And then I just was like, well, we could do a monk. Halflings are pretty good monks. She just played a monk, so that scratched that. Didn't want to do druid because, again, Keyleth. And I was like, what would be... And I landed on fighter. And I was like, no, I don't want to draw comparisons between Orem and this character. I don't want that to be sort of the thing. But Marisha seemed to really enjoy the mobility that Bo had, and Halfling is a great race for that. I suppose Tabaxi. Tabaxi might work. Tabaxi would also play into her note-taking a little better than a halfling, maybe. I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about Tabaxi, I think I kind of like that better. And there are Tabaxi in Exandria, so it's not off the table. A Tabaxi fighter. And I had City Watch as the background. Just because it is contrary to what Bo was and what Keyleth was. Again, Marisha not stepping into the leadership role naturally. And that's one of the things that she says she took from playing Keyleth for so long, is a willingness to be the leader. And I just like the idea of her being an authority figure, like a member of the City Watch. Just as a complete sort of 180 might be too far, but like 120 degrees off from Bo. And if you go the Tabaxi route, then suddenly she can be like, her Tabaxi nature is what draws her into investigations, just because she's curious. Yeah. I think that's more meaty than the halfling angle. Although I kind of wanted to enjoy Marisha playing one of the small races too. And I already had a gnome. But I did think about gnome for this character. But yeah, those are my sort of fantasy builds for them, to challenge them in different ways. Snoopy, yeah, and I think it's going to be. I think it's almost unavoidable. Jaman Saord. If the inciting incident is Jaman Saord dying, that creates a power vacuum. And political intrigue inevitably becomes a military campaign. And that kind of campaign also allows them to visit other places. Rose, that is a good point about the Aormatons. Damn, that's a good one. I think I'd give that to Marisha instead of the Tabaxi or the Halfling. I think I'd give that to her. I don't want to give it to Talison because that again plays into his I'm ancient and whatnot. And Marisha playing the Cobalt Soul, playing one of Matt's creations. If Aormaton, if they are going to be different from Warforged. Just like my artificial people are different from Warforged. In fact, I just did a whole new redesign of them. And which maybe we'll go over the next DM design and discussion. And sort of why I changed what I changed. Because it was a complete ground-up redesign. With the idea that robots tend to be purpose-built. And so I did a little... I took a page out of my Dogs of Third Earth design philosophy, tweaked it a little bit, but made it so that you can really sort of customize and build sort of the design and service history. That would be a built-in connection, yeah, from the bat to campaign 2. Yeah, that's... And also, if they are planning to do an updated Wilde mount, like they did with Taldore, adding the Aormatons would be that thing. Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I think I will put it on the Discord, in the Discord server, for you to take a look at. There's a couple other things I thought about putting in there. The Star Wars Worlds of Darkness rules, my Highlander in Worlds of Darkness rule set, a couple other stuff that haven't been talked about at all. But I was like, oh, it's written. I might as well, I can put it in there. So, and I might do that tonight, actually. After the show. Yeah. Yeah, that was my fun little what if I could design or give them their characters for campaign 3. I'm not saying we will see any of this for campaign 3. This is just my, wouldn't it be interesting to see them do? In the spirit of Marvel's What If, this is my what if. But yeah. I am having my wisdom teeth out on Tuesday next week. We will be doing the show. I don't know how much I will be able to contribute. I shouldn't be a drooling blob, but, you know, stay tuned. And maybe I am down to nodding or shaking my head. We'll see. And maybe even but I am so looking forward to Ashley's one-shot. Space horror. It's exciting. And I've purposefully avoided trying to look up what system they're going to be using. I want to be surprised. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Because like, is it gonna be Alien? Is it gonna be Event Horizon? Is it gonna be some strange Star Trek kind of horror. I don't know. And yeah, so excited. And I think I'm probably gonna end up having leftover curry for dinner that night. Yeah, it's gonna be good. Yeah, I saw some stuff on Twitter about the content warning that they're putting on it. So, I mean, it's a horror game. I think that should go without saying, personally. Horror is always going to touch on the most sensitive subjects. Yeah. So we'll see. I'm interested to see what everyone's going to play. Or I guess what type. I hadn't thought about Travis playing a horror game. I don't know. I mean, it would be entertaining to have her go after Travis, but that's a good point. Also, Rose, Travis having to push the button. If you can set it up so that happens willingly, that's the best way to do it. But I don't know. With it being horror, I think we can expect something out of Travis like more akin to the Vampire the Masquerade one shot that Talison ran, where Matt was turned to ash at the front door, just in time for him to have to leave. So, and he was pretty hesitant during Undeadwood as well. So, in a horror game, Travis's I have to push the button instincts tend to be blunted. But we'll see. I don't. Yeah, again, I don't think she'll do body horror because that tends to rely on the graphic descriptions of things. And she was saying in the campaign wrap-up for Exandria Unlimited that she doesn't feel she has that ability. I think she's underselling herself, as I think most people do. But yeah, seeing her behind the DM screen is going to be amazing. And I'm grateful for everyone who pushed the Kickstarter over the threshold for the stretch goal. And we will be here next Tuesday discussing it. Hopefully you'll be able to understand me through the gauze. And yeah, we will see you then.